and welcome to another Coffee and Connect chat. Today we're talking about relationships and nurturing fulfilling and positive and healthy relationships is imperative for our well-being, as is understanding how we communicate and the impact that our way of communicating is having on other people and our relationships. So today I am super excited to welcome Joseph McGuire, founder of Clearsight Communications and author of Face Facts, to join me today. Welcome, Joseph.
Hi, Sue. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, too. So according to Joseph, our face doesn't lie. Isn't that intriguing?
Well, I like to think so anyway, yes. I mean, I've been studying and teaching this stuff for almost 40 years. It's a 3,000-year-old Chinese tradition that essentially I'm working with. I've adapted, I guess, for a Western audience and from my own experience, etc. But the understanding and the wisdom going back that length of time shows that if we know how to read the signs, our faces reveal so much about who we are, where we've come from, in terms of our emotional history, our life history, our ancestral history, where we're at in our lives now, physically, mentally, emotionally, and where we can be going depending on how we approach life.
Yeah, and this Joseph, isn't something that we just learn. Maybe intuitively we can tell if we're mindful of reading, other people's energies and a lot about their face. But this can really, really support more like positive and healthier relationships. So what we were speaking about, you said it's an ancient Chinese modality, or where did you learn this, or what brought you first of all into this?
Okay, I've never had a direct career path or life path as such. I was reading people as a small kid, but I couldn't have told you what I was doing. I just intuitively knew a lot about people.
Yeah.
And then many years later, I was introduced to a change of diet, actually, from an acupuncturist. And he basically his recommendations changed my diet, which greatly enhanced my well-being. So I was fascinated by this and I wanted to explore it further. There was natural foods. And then I knew I was going to be living in London at some point, and he gave me addresses where I could follow it up. And one of them happened to be a particular center where I signed up for a course which I thought was essentially going to be about nutrition and whole foods, but actually included the modality of shiatsu, which is a branch of Oriental medicine. And as part of the training, I was introduced to face reading as one of the diagnostic tools.
Right.
So I just became immersed in it from there.
Fantastic. So we were speaking before, so now we know what it is. It's amazing. And now we're going to learn how can it help us? We discussed that with so many people, certainly over in the Western part of the world, for the last year have been in lockdown, and our relationships, even the most healthy relationships, have been strained. A lot of people working from home. So how can this benefit us, or what can you tell us on, what can we do to enhance those relationships, or what you've come up with in the last year?
Right. Okay. There's a lot in that. So many people in the last year have found that they're living in work, which is the phrase that's being used a lot, and they're living in very close proximity to people they thought they knew and loved. Many cases do know and love, but find that there are communication issues and find that there are challenges. And one of the basic things is we tend to see the world through our own prism, the prism of our own experiences, whether those experiences are positive, neutral, happy, whatever, in some cases very unhappy. But we tend to then assume that other people see the world as we do, and we tend to communicate from that perspective, the perspective of where we've come from, rather than seeing where they're at. And so often what happens is people are talking at each other rather than talking to. And they're not talking from a place of mutual understanding or even mutual appreciation. And then when tensions arise, and understandably, when people are physically confined, which we haven't been accustomed to, people are going to feel more stressed and strained. And any of our own older patterns and issues are likely to surface. And then if there's two or more people who have got patterns surfacing which haven't been addressed, it's going to cause a lot of stress, strain, confusion, misunderstanding, miscommunication, and unfortunately, frequently a lot worse. So learning to recognize, like if you can read a face well and accurately, you'll understand that everybody has their own individual communication style. And even just a cursory glance at somebody will tell me a lot about how they receive information, how they process it, and how they process and absorb it, and then how they communicate externally. So recognizing that gives me quite very useful and very practical clues as to how best to communicate with them.
With that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for example, we haven't physically met, but I can see from your face that if I were to launch into a very technical description of things straight off, it wouldn't work for you. There has to be that personalized dimension to the communication. Like I have to approach you as a person first, rather than as a therapist or a business person or whatever. So that like your eyebrows and your eyes immediately tell me that. And that's so that there are so many visible clues which tell us where the person is at, where they're coming from, and how best to approach them. You know, and they're very obvious, they're very visible, which is where the name of the business comes from, Clearsight.
Yes, Clearsight.
And they make such a difference if we can adapt our style, our communication style, our presentation style to the other person. And I'm not talking about diluting our values. I'm not saying that we will automatically get on with everybody, because we won't, no matter who we are. But it's being clear that if we're willing to adapt our style and our presentation, it makes such a difference in terms of building bridges, building connections, and opening relationships in a way that in many cases they haven't been open before.
Yeah. Like you said, we tend to live on autopilot, so we just act and speak, and behave as we always do. We're not mindful, a lot of us, of how we actually communicate and the impact that we're having on other people. And I can see how this could have a tremendously positive impact on people at home and in the workplace. And this is something I know you teach in your course that you're holding. And the way I want to talk about is the way we perceive ourselves and present ourselves. I'm sure we also do that maybe quite mindlessly. And being clear on who we are and how we present ourselves can have a great impact on the way our relationships with other people.
Absolutely. It has a huge impact. And so often, as you say, we're not mindful. And that's an unfortunate effect, consequence. You can use so many different terms there. But there's also one of the if you like, the traps we fall into as well is we tend to assume that we are this. This is who I am. This is how I am. And we tend to have a very fixed notion of our identity. And there's so many studies in the world of psychology now which demonstrate that that's a falsity. We are a blend of all sorts of qualities depending on the context in which we're operating. But when we're connecting with or looking to connect with somebody else, whether that's a business relationship, a social relationship, or a more intimate relationship, it is important that we bear in mind that we are impacting on them as much as they are impacting on us. And that's before we open our mouths. That's before we move a muscle. That's before we say anything. Our very presence is impacting. And again, is to recognize that our whole body is an antenna. The whole body is an antenna, and it's both receiving and it's transmitting all the time. And we've so often forgotten that because it's been trained out of us. And so often we're coming from this place here, which is often a very confused place for so many of us at the best of times. So learning to attune ourselves to our body, the idea of the three brains, which has been demonstrated so often in neuroscience now, the head brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain, and learning to align those makes such a difference in terms of how we are, how present we are to ourselves, how present we can be with others, how much we can share and connect with others, how accurately we can perceive what others are looking to communicate to us and share with us, and what's behind the words as well, which is so important, because so often language creates a fog of confusion and misunderstanding as well.
Yeah.
So
It's
a
like
roundabout answer to your question.
Yeah, what's being said, but there's so much not being said that we can pick up on.
Yeah.
People. Where do we start to begin to tune into this? If one wants to enhance their relationships and just say, you know, okay, but where do I start? Okay, we know we can go and do your training course, which we'll talk about. If I was to go out today and I want to just make the first move to improve my relationships, how do I begin to tune into this whole body system?
Okay. Yeah, for me, the first thing is meditation. And meditation takes many forms. I guess I've worked with many different forms of meditation, and at this stage I just do my own thing. But there, like, if you don't know where to start, go on YouTube, check out. I mean, there's so many forms of meditation there. There's so many meditations, whether it's guided meditation or music, forms of music that'll bring you into a meditative state. But learn to pay attention to the breath. Tune into the breath, and it is a training, it is a practice, it's a process, it's a learning. You don't get it immediately, and it's repeated learning, repeated practice. But that for me is the first thing, to be present to the breath, to be present to oneself, and then to become aware that our body is also a messenger. Our body is a metaphor for how we are. So learning to pay attention to how the body is and what our own body is telling us, because our own body is communicating with us all the time. And again, part of the understanding that I got from the Chinese tradition, and it's there in so many ancient and indigenous traditions, is that mind and body are one inseparable unit. And again, that's being demonstrated in neuroscience, epigenetics, etc., that there is no separation between any of these dimensions. So once we begin to do that, and once we begin the meditation, once we begin to be conscious of our own presence, rather than being caught up in the busyness of everyday life, then we begin to realize, oh, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more going on. And I'm so often, for any of us, me included, there's so much busyness in our head, so much pressure, stress, etc., to, must do, should do, all that stuff that gets in the way. So taking time to just remove ourselves from that and to be present to ourselves is a massive starting point. And then to make sure we practice. So even if that's 10-15 minutes a day to start, that's a powerful start.
That's wonderful. That's a great place to start, because sometimes we don't know where to start. And talking about like communication, so that's the non-verbal, and tuning into our whole body and being aware that we are emitting this energy, and we can, as a skill, cultivate this to enhance better relationships. And then we talk about verbal communication. I also love that you said we often speak to fill the gap or the silence, or speak because we're trying to get our words out first, and I think we're all guilty of this. It's natural. But alternatively, are we communicating and hoping to connect deeply with the other person, which can only lead to more fulfilling relationships? And again, I think it comes back to that autopilot, just taking a step back. And so, would you like to talk anything more about that verbal, flow that always comes out of us, and how to manage that?
Yeah, that's a process. And again, it's a process for all of us. I'm constantly learning and unlearning. And one of the people whose work I've been studying of late is a guy called Chase Hughes. Chase was a former FBI trainer, and counterintelligence and like interrogation and a lot of that stuff. Which is a fascinating field. It's not exactly what I'm involved in, but I'm fascinated by the mindset and the thinking and the training itself. And one of the basic points he makes is that everybody is insecure. Everybody is insecure, no matter who you are, what your background is, how apparently successful, etc. you are, or what skill set you have. Everybody has it. And so often we're talking to talking to cover up the insecurity. So often we're talking to convince people that we again, one of the things he talks about is we're all wearing masks. So we're trying to cover up unconsciously, we're trying to cover the fact that we are wearing a mask and pretend that we're not, and we are bigger, better, etc., than we necessarily feel ourselves to be. So again, it's an ongoing challenge because we're living in an increasingly noisy world and everybody now is online. So everybody is clamoring for attention. So again, it requires taking a step back to ask, why am I here? What is my intention? What is my purpose? And who do I really want to connect with? Who can I help directly, or who can help me? Or who can I help somebody else? And to me, they're just very basic questions. I can't necessarily connect with everybody. We don't have the time. I can't help everybody. Not everybody can help me. Not everybody will respond to me, and vice versa. So it's being discerning. And again, discernment is one of my values. Being discerning about how we're using our time, why we're here, what it is we have to offer, what it is we have to contribute, what do we need, what are we willing to receive, what are we willing to be open to. And again, context is important, and it all evolves. So it's not, I know this is a roundabout answer to your question, but it's not necessarily a fixed answer, a fixed expectation, a fixed outcome, a desired outcome. It depends. There's a lot of it depends in my answers.
Right.
That's confusing.
That was great. That was very clear. And as things come up just for me, for people on Zoom, like who knows if we'll all go back to the workplace the way we did. A lot of people on Zoom, there isn't that in-person energy connection that we did feel before. We can still feel it, but it's in a different way. Are there any tips for how we can communicate again to enhance deeper connection, or is there anything we can be mindful of when we are communicating via this little camera on a computer?
Yeah, I mean it's a very strange experience, and we're not geared to it, so we're all learning anew. Obviously many youngsters have grown up with this form of communication, but so many executives are reporting now that because they're only seeing like the upper chest, head, that they're finding it difficult to connect, to build relationships, because they don't really get a full sense of the person. They don't know who to trust, and trust is a massive issue that's coming up in the business, across the business world now. But one of the first things I would say for any of us, again, and no matter what the context is for connecting with somebody on Zoom or connecting with a group on Zoom, is to, again, just make sure we're relaxed before we go on. Just, again, settle ourselves, make sure our posture is, make sure we're physically comfortable, make sure our posture is reasonably erect rather than, slumped or whatever, because that gives the impression that we're not paying attention or we're not interested. But that our posture is reasonably erect, and that we are calm and relaxed within ourselves. And then when we see the face, is to smile. So we communicate that we are welcoming them. We are open. We are receptive to something positive happening. That's the basic point to start with.
Yeah, something else that I read recently, actually, that now I think of is, when you can't see someone's hand, people tend to have more distrust. Is that something you've come across?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. When we seem to be hardwired as humans, that's the first thing we notice about somebody is their hands. Where are the hands and what are they doing? That seems to be very, very deep in our, in our original, our psyche, whatever, probably going back to prehistoric days. So paying attention to the hands is important. And then, so when we're on screen and we're using our hands, it's to make sure our hands are clearly visible rather than making the big wide, Donald Trump type gestures, because once the hands disappear off the screen like that, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? What are they hiding? So so if we're using our hands make sure they're visible. But there is that element of when we're not seeing the whole body and we can't see all the posture and the movements and the gestures, it's harder to be sure. So that's where my skill set is.
That's very good. Yeah. So I'll hold my hands up. I do raise my hands around a lot. Another thing that comes to mind is when we're making eye contact in an online virtual meeting. When I'm making eye contact with you, I'm looking at my camera. But if I want to pick up on your body language, then I need to look away. So I guess, do we just need to balance that?
Yeah, and it's one of the challenges I find, because again, it's the natural thing is to look into the eyes of the person we're communicating with, rather than into the camera, because the camera is at a distance from the face. So I guess it's a case of paying attention when somebody else is speaking, paying attention to their facial, their face, their expressions, their gestures, etc., not just the words. But then when we're speaking, it's to speak into the camera and imagine that we're looking into their eyes. Like I have a series of smiley faces stuck on here just below the camera to remind me where to look, because I tend to forget, because my thing is to look at the face.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and that's very helpful, because trust, when you start from a place of distrust, and it's when you're in that space, you want to quickly be able to enhance that trust, build a relationship, the rapport, and move forward. So that's really helpful. And in the workspace, we have mentioned, or in one of your great articles on your website, I had read that in the workplace, there's a great shift, thankfully, towards emotional, intelligent leadership. And I'm very interested in this. I'm studying this ongoing. And so what I found interesting that you said, what we were working from a place of a more macho, ego-driven, brain-focused way of working, of dealing with people in the workplace. In your experience, is that shifting? Has that changed? And if you want to tell us anything more about that.
Yeah, it's ongoing. Obviously, for anybody wanting to learn about emotional intelligence, I highly recommend anything by Daniel Goleman as a starting point.
Yeah.
There are others, but Daniel Goleman is the most powerful starting point. You can also then look at the work of Martin Seligman, positive psychology, and various others, but definitely a great starting point. Yes, I can't give absolutely I don't know what's the term I'm looking for, full scale feedback on it, because there's still a lot of research being done, and it's still a new place to be working where everybody's online. It does seem to be changing. It does seem to be changing in some companies. There are more alert and aware and open leaders. There are many who still aren't, and I suspect we're going to see massive changes in the corporate world over the next number of years, because you're going to see a lot of people leaving, I think, and moving to company. Well, we're seeing it already, a lot of new startups, etc. It's been happening over the last 15 years or so, but it's really rapidly changing now. So you're going to see a lot more startups, I think, a lot more people going into that entrepreneurial space, rather than working for companies, and certainly rather than working for companies long term. So any bigger companies wanting to survive are going to need to demonstrate emotional intelligence, authenticity in their communication, really taking on board the needs of the workforce and the emotional needs, the well-being needs of the workforce, as opposed to simply giving them perks like pool tables and etc., which is lovely, but it's it's a bit deceptive as well.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, no, that's great to hear. So that's exciting for the future, that we're making that shift to the whole being and tuning into that to get the best out of people. And then companies, of course, their productivity will also increase. So it seems like a win-win situation. Your workforce will be healthier and happier, so there won't be the absenteeism, mental health issues. So it creates a huge, really broad spectrum as to what your work can evolve, or how it can have such a huge ripple effect in families, communities, and the workplace. And which is amazing. And I'm delighted that you're here and I found you to talk about this. And can you tell me a bit about it's a 6-week training that you have, is that right?
It is, yes. Yeah, it's the next one starts on the Wednesday 31st, so yesterday fortnight, Wednesday 31st of March. It's
Okay.
from 7 p.m. to 8:30 in GMT, our time zone. I do tend to get people coming from different time zones for it, so people can be from anywhere in the world. It's a 6-week course. It's called Your Face Doesn't Lie, Communication Skills for Exceptional Relationships. It takes people through, it's very practical, it's very interactive, and it's taking people through the face sort of in a very clear, structured way, showing what the different features mean, different size, shape, length, etc. of different features mean, and what they mean in terms of communication, in terms of interaction, in terms of physical, mental, emotional well-being, but particularly with the emphasis on communication and building relationships. And I break the face, metaphorically speaking, of course, break the face down into the different zones and features. So it's giving people, as I say, very clear, practical skills that they can take away. The course is recorded, so people get the recordings so they can read back. And I bring up a lot of images on PowerPoint and talk about specific, what those features specifically mean, and compare, a range of different eye shapes, for example, or a range of different eyebrow shapes, noses, etc. So very clear about what each different shape means in terms of the personality, the behavior style, communication, etc. So it's
would be
very interactive.
For people, would be very useful for people interviewing, going into, say, business deals, interviewing potential employees, along those lines. That would be really helpful. But if I say, well, look, this is my eye shape, this is the way my eyes are, I can't change it. So does it just it gives you a picture of the person I am, as to whether you want to engage or interact further with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And what my work is about observation. It's not about making judgments. That's the first thing. I'm very, very clear about that. So it's about, for me, it's about connecting. And I start off from the perspective that I trust you unless I have reason not to, unless you demonstrate reason not to trust.
Okay.
So I'm open. I'm open to engagement. So then I'm looking at, okay, these are your features. So yes, you can't change the eye shape. So your eyes tell me, like, you have big, round, open eyes. So again, that confirms for me that if I want to communicate with you and build some kind of relationship with you, then I have to be open. I have to be emotionally open to that. I have to demonstrate that I am emotionally open, that I'm willing to engage as a person.
You're mirroring what you see in the other person to engage on the same level. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for just one other obvious thing, when we see somebody with big, round, open eyes like that, it is very, very important that we're honest with them, because if you sense that I were being dishonest with you, the shutters would come down very quickly, and you would sense it more than see it.
Yes.
Because you're governed primarily by feeling, and I don't just mean emotion. I'm in sensing as much as emotion.
Yeah, very true. Very true. That's very, very powerful, and very. It's great that it's a practical course, so it's skills. That's also, I think, important to know. It's not just that and obviously you do have a gift, but it's something, again, like mindfulness training or awareness, emotional intelligence. These are skills that we can build and utilize in our everyday, which enhances our relationships, which makes us happier and healthier in the long run. And that's what it's about. And thank you for that. Your book, Face Facts.
Which you can see behind me here.
Yes, I see it there. Yeah, I definitely am going to attend one of your courses and get the book at some point. But where can one get that book, and give people an idea of what it's all about?
Okay, the book is available through my website, clearsightcommunications.com. So you can get a hard copy, signed hard copy, or if people prefer the Kindle version, it's available on Amazon.
Right.
So that's where you get it. It's deliberately a very it's a primer. It's a practical introduction to the face, to reading faces. It's full of. I'll just take a copy down.
Yeah.
I'm not big on pushing and marketing, but as you can maybe see, that there's a lot of very practical images there. Like I want it to be something that's useful to people. So it's taking people through, like, say, six foreheads, 6 eyebrows, 6 eyes, etc., and saying this is what it means in terms of a personality. If you see somebody with this shape, etc., this is what it means, and this is how they're likely to behave. This is how they need to be communicated with. So again, it's a very practical introduction that people can take away and carry with them. Like it's deliberately a small book, so that it's useful, it's portable, and people can then take and learn the skills and put them into life practice.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Because like you said, if you're communicating with me in a way that doesn't resonate with me, there's automatically going to be friction, or just we won't be on the same wavelength.
Absolutely.
So that's really, really important, actually, skill to cultivate. And hopefully our youth will be, this will be something that would be introduced to them as a skill, like emotional intelligence going forward. I think it would be very, very useful. So hopefully the education department might consider that one.
I wonder. And unfortunately, so much.
Yeah, at least people in the workplace, this is something that would be very valuable to people to take on as a workshop to enhance their workforce and their people. Their employees are the face of their company. So I see it being very, very valuable. One last question, Joseph. When our limitations in travel, etc., are back to normal, will you be holding in-person classes as well, or just online? I'm sure you will do in person because it's so interactive.
Excuse me. My preference is always for in-person. That's what I've always loved. I love the whole thing of going into a room where I know absolutely nobody and I have to tell them about themselves. And very often it's a case of they're with friends who know them. So I have to demonstrate that I do know what I'm talking about. But the joy is in the interaction. But seeing people's eyes light up when they recognize something. Oh, so that's what's really going on between me and X, or that's my brother or my sister or my husband, my wife, my partner, whoever it may be, and say, oh, now I understand. So it's like the light bulbs flash for people, and that's the real pleasure, because then you can see people realize, oh, now I can change this, now I can improve this, or now I understand this about myself.
That's what I was going to say, because as you had said earlier, we come from a place of, learning. So we have so many perceptions and limiting beliefs about ourselves, of who we actually are, that I can imagine when you can pick up as a stranger, seeing a person picking things out in a person, it can really ignite of like, whoa, actually that is me. And I can see then an unraveling and a breaking down of some beliefs, maybe unhelpful beliefs that we had about ourselves, and helping us to embrace who we really are. So there's great self-awareness building there, as well as social awareness. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And my basic objective is to leave people feeling better about themselves for the experience of having met me. It's really that simple.
Yeah. Well, that is something I can definitely see happening, because it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure. Well, thank you for joining us. And I'll just see if anybody had any questions, if there was anybody live. And if not, we will put your link into the comments and share. Sorry, now I have this up and it closed. Okay, Julie says, great interview, friend of ours, Julie.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, And if anybody else has any questions, they now know where to contact Joseph. And I look forward to using the tools and techniques that you've shared with us thus far. And we will definitely chat again. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Sue. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye.